Lee Miller's early life was one of strife and misfortune. Born in Poughkeepsie, New York, Miller was first photographed by her father, Theodore, when she was 7. Theodore photographed his daughter, nude apart from a pair of slippers, standing to attention in the snow. Theodore Miller experimented photographically with his daughter throughout her youth. He was fascinated by the stethoscopic photography technique, which was a precursor to modern 3D. It was in this style that Miller was captured nude the most during her early life. Aged 19, Miller was almost killed when she stepped out in front of a streetcar in New York City. As it happened, the man who saved her was Condé Nast, the publisher of Vogue magazine. The incident gave Miller some powerful contacts in the modelling industry, and for the next 2 years she was one of the most sought-after models in New York City. However, her career was abruptly ended in the modelling industry when one of her photographers sold a picture of her to a company which produced sanitary pads for women. In the conservative 1920s, publicly associating with something as taboo as menstruation was a no-no. Miller never regained her modelling fame.
In 1929, she travelled to Paris because she wanted to work under Man Ray, who refused at first but then agreed. They soon became lovers. She then created her own photographic studio in Paris and overtook many of Ray's fashion photography assignments. Many of the pictures credited to Ray during this time were actually taken by Miller. Along with Ray, she rediscovered the technique of solarization, which would underpin many of his future and more famous works. She soon became an active participant in the Surrealist movement and was friends with people such as Pablo Picasso, Paul Eluard and Jean Cocteau. In 1932, she left Paris to come to New York, where she established a photo studio with her brother, who worked as her darkroom assistant. Her work was included in the Modern European Photography exhibition in 1932, and in the next year she had her only solo exhibition. In 1934, she abandoned her studio to marry Egyptian businessman Aziz Aloué Bey.
Then the Blitz happened. When Miller experienced this firsthand, she decided to become a war correspondent for Vogue. By doing so, she became one of only 5 female reporters during the Second World War.
Lee had her own ability to turn death into something artistic. The serenity of her pictures stood in great contrast to most other photos during the war. Through the camera lens, she portrayed the conflict in a new light, original and unmatched by other photographers of her time. When Dachau was freed in 1945, Miller was one of the first correspondents on the scene. After a long day of walking through the inhuman conditions of the concentration camp, she and a couple of colleagues broke into Hitler's own apartment, and here she snapped one of her most famous photographs. The most compelling part of this picture is her boots. These boots had been dragged through the hell of war and most importantly through the dirt of Dachau. On Hitler's pristine carpet in his own home, she left the muddy stains representing the people he had made suffer. Little did she know then, but on the same day Hitler committed suicide. After the war had officially ended in 1945, Miller continued taking photos and writing stories about important social injustice.
While other female photographers were willing to work with officers only, she became buddies with ordinary soldiers. Aiming to show the impact of women on war, she captured unseen moments of civilian and service women's lives in Britain and Europe. She was imprisoned for entering a combat zone forbidden for females. Her courage to challenge barriers made her one of the most important war photographers of the 20th century. Her exceptional project, A Woman's War, was a rare attempt to present the significant role of women at the front. Moreover, she is a perfect representative of an image of a woman in wartime herself. Her story reflects the trajectories of many other women. In September 1944, she did a report on the work of the nurses who followed up the Normandy landings and the Battle of St. Malo. Lee Miller photographs of the Paris liberation can be considered as a turning point in her career. Her concentration camp documentation demonstrates moral outrage, empathy, and captivation of the Holocaust. The reader of Vogue was left to examine the excessive reality, swollen tongues, bruised cheeks, pictures of suicided and murdered.
She died from cancer in 1977, aged 70 years old. Anthony Penrose uncovered many of her unpublished works from the attic of their home, including 20,000 negatives of pictures she had taken. During her lifetime, she didn't do much to promote her own work, but her son has dedicated his life to promoting her work. Her legacy lives on as one of the greatest photojournalists of the Second World War, capturing the perspective of a woman during the war and having an artistic touch to each of her pictures. She's remembered for being extremely multi-talented and for creating art in every field she pursued.